The Secret History of the Credit Card, filmed by David Rummel, presentation by Raquel Lawrence. The Secret History of the Credit Card is a documentary made by PBS alongside Frontline and the New York Times, which traces the origins of the credit card industry and brings light to some problems the industry is causing for consumers. It was first aired in 2004. The film is credible as it features many experts and specialists within America's banking and credit industry who speak on the many problems that the industry creates, and is aired by PBS, which has been around since 1970 and is a non-profit public broadcasting network. The credit card industry first got its start in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Big banks in New York at the time weren't making enough money off the interest rates in the state because of a state-placed law called the usury law, which put a cap on interest rates. Banks couldn't charge more than 12% on most consumer loans. South Dakota at the time was facing recession and inflation. Banks were issuing few mortgages and interest rates were highly regulated. Governor of South Dakota at the time, Bill Janklow, changed legislation and got rid of the usury laws. So in 1981, Citibank moved their operations to South Dakota. One main attraction for the move was a Supreme Court decision called the Marquette decision that made it possible for banks to export its interest rates of the states where its operations were based in to other states despite usury laws in place in those states. Banks had no restriction on what they could charge for interest rates worldwide, and it allowed for them to charge higher interest rates to riskier customers, and deregulation of interest rates allowed more people to obtain credit cards. The credit card industry in the time the film first aired was, and still today, a very lucrative industry. In 2003, Citibank was more profitable than Microsoft and Walmart. A well-known bank, MBNA, profits then were 1.5 that of McDonald's. And then nearly 140 million Americans had credit cards and were using their credit cards like never before, and were charging $1.5 trillion in the year 2003 alone. How does debt accumulate? At this time in the film, the average credit card debt an American family carried was about $8,000, and this number has not changed much even today. The average American family carried 8 credit cards. In the last 5 years from 2003, 7 million Americans had filed for bankruptcy. How Americans fall into debt is that they fall behind or fail to make a credit card payment in time. This could be due to a loss of income, a medical problem, or a family breakup. Late fees can come into play. With one late payment, your interest rates go up. With that interest rate plus added late fees, it's possible for you to go over your limit, which results in another fee. Credit card companies make most of their money off of fees and interest rates. Back in the early beginnings of the industry, banks used to require customers to pay 5% of their balances off. How banks reel in customers is to lower that requirement to, say, 2%. Having low monthly payments and high credit limits are what attracts customers to these credit cards. Going a step further, as the market got more competitive with more banks offering low interest rates for a period of time under stringent conditions that most consumers were unaware of. Banks look for certain consumers to market to. They are open to a vast set of information collected by credit bureaus pretty commonly known like Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian. The collecting agencies track the accounts you have open, the balances, and whether you pay them on time. Banks have 2 common types of consumers, revolvers and deadbeats. Banks hate deadbeats because they make no money off of them. These are people who pay off their credit card bills on time. Banks' best customers are people who struggle to pay off their credit card bills on time. And in 2003, that was 90 million Americans. What determines credit? The FICO score. Commonly known as a credit score, it determines how much interest you'll pay on a credit card, and lenders use that to determine how much credit they'll grant you. The median FICO is 720 out of 850. Riskiest customers have a score below 600. It's estimated that 75% of the U.S. population at the time who was eligible for credit had a FICO score at any given time. Scales of the issue. Local. Consumers are falling into debt and living off their credit cards and falling into more debt, which can potentially lead to bankruptcy. State. There aren't many laws stopping the practices these companies are doing. Usury laws are being bypassed and interest rates remain high throughout the states, and nothing is being done about it. Global/international. The amount of consumer debt the population holds is shocking and could potentially hold back the economy with no money to spend on goods and services because people are trying to pay back their debt. Traps. One trap in the fine print on credit card contracts is the universal default that says if you miss a payment on anything with another creditor, they can raise your interest rates. Even for the simple reason if your balances are too high or if there is a change in your credit worthiness. Banks can also change the interest rate on money you've already spent. The terms and conditions on your contract are subject to change as well, at will by the issuer without the credit card holder's permission, and they only have to give you 15 days notice. This map shows the borrowers who are in debt in the first quarter of 2011. They are predominantly in the Northeast and the Southwest, specifically California and Nevada. This graph taken from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York shows that 8% of a total of $11.44 trillion in the first quarter of 2012 was credit card debt. So what's being done about it? Pretty much nothing. The OCC, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, which exclusively regulates the national banks since 2004, aid in the problem by immunizing big credit card issuers from most state consumer protection laws. The OCC has the ability to prohibit these banking practices and admonishes banking companies, but does nothing to stop the problem. Many bills calling for more disclosure to consumers from credit issuers have been killed by the American Bankers Association, which is funded by many credit card companies. And these are my references. Thank you for listening.